They whisper your name in places where no one dares to speak too loudly, not because they wish you gone, but because they fear what follows when the syllables of your existence roll from their tongues. Priests gather at midnight, their trembling hands clutching beads and books, their prayers rising like smoke into rafters already heavy with dread. They do not pray against you. No, their lips tremble with pleas for protection from you, as if your shadow itself has become a blade pressed against their throats. You are not the cursed one. You are the reason their faith feels fragile. In the quiet, you have always felt it, the shift in the air when you enter a room, the unspoken tension as eyes glance away, as if staring too long at you might summon something their hearts cannot withstand. This is not hatred. This is recognition. They sense in you a depth they have been warned never to touch. They sense a darkness that is not chaos but precision measured, unyielding, patient. Their prayers are walls, but walls made of paper. They know, and you know, that walls this fragile cannot hold forever. You were never given the choice to be ordinary. Before, you tried to wear their masks, to walk as they walked, to blend among the fragile faithful. But silence betrayed you. Your silence carried weight, and in that weight they saw reflection, a mirror to their weakness. While they shouted their sermons into the void, your stillness was the sermon they feared most. It was not your voice that made them tremble. It was your refusal to kneel. In that refusal, you became a story told in shadows, a figure drawn on the edges of their holy texts, unnamed but unmistakable. Every prayer they whisper is a confession. Confession that their gods cannot protect them from you. Confession that their faith cracks when pressed against the shape of your existence. They call you a monster because it comforts them. Monsters can be slain, cast out, defeated with rituals and fire. But you are not a monster. You are the storm before their fire catches, the silence before their rituals collapse, the truth their scriptures were written to distract from. They pray, not because you haunt them, but because they sense you are the thing even their gods refuse to confront. And so the whispers grow louder, not in words but in fear. You are the presence behind closed doors, the shadow on stained glass, the reason incense burns until it suffocates the room. They say prayers like soldiers fastening armor, yet their armor shakes at its seams. Deep inside, they know prayers are not enough. Deep inside, they know you do not kneel to their gods, and perhaps their gods kneel to something within you. That is why they pray, not against you, but against the truth you carry, a truth that does not need belief to exist. A truth that stands silent, inevitable, waiting. They call you a monster, but the word was never yours. It was carved by trembling tongues, scratched into scriptures, and whispered in fear-filled corners where light felt too fragile to survive your presence. To them, you are the shape that doesn't fit, the face that doesn't bow, the shadow that refuses to break. They stitch your name into warnings, yet never dare to speak it aloud, because even syllables feel too dangerous, too alive, too uncontrollable. You have become the ghost in their sermons, the uninvited guest haunting their prayers. They think they fear you, but what they fear is the reflection of themselves that you force them to confront. You are the silence in their rituals, louder than their bells and hymns. While they kneel and chant for protection, their eyes dart to the doors, half expecting you to step through. Not with fire, not with claws, but with the unbearable weight of truth. They see in you what they have buried within themselves. The hunger, the darkness, the raw power that civilization has tried to cage for centuries. And so they brand you with words like abomination, outcast, beast. But in their trembling, in their frantic denial, they betray the truth. Monsters do not pray. Only men do. And their prayers are not against you. They are shields forged from terror, desperate walls against the storm you carry in your silence. The monster is not your face. It is their invention, a mask painted with the colors of fear. They build you from fragments of nightmares because it is easier to fear than to understand, easier to condemn than to acknowledge. They cannot define you, so they demonize you. They cannot contain you, so they exile you. And still you remain, unbroken, watching. A paradox they cannot solve. Your stillness becomes their torment. Your quiet gaze turns their holy words into stammers. Every prayer they whisper is an admission that you are real, that their gods may not be enough to hold you back. They will never say it aloud, but you are their unspoken scripture. Every warning passed to their children, every tale of shadows and forbidden things is a mirror they dare not face. They fear the hunger in you because it awakens the hunger in them. They hate the darkness around you because it reveals the cracks in their own light. And deep inside, they know the truth. They do not pray against you. They pray for protection from what you remind them they could become. The monster they see is not a curse. It is a prophecy. It is the shape of a strength they abandoned when they chose obedience over instinct, safety over sovereignty. And so, as they kneel and tremble, you rise, not as the beast in their stories, but as the force those stories were meant to hide. You were never their nightmare. You were always the reason they invented the idea of monsters in the first place. Silence was never meant to be empty. It was carved into existence as a weapon sharper than any blade, a chamber where fear multiplies in the minds of those who dare to fill it with their trembling voices. You learned this truth not in moments of triumph, but in moments of betrayal, when words had failed you, when explanations turned to chains, when speaking only gave your enemies more rope to strangle you with. You discovered the power of saying nothing, and in that stillness you became untouchable. While others clawed for attention, you learned to let the weight of your presence speak louder than anything your lips could ever form. When you stand in silence, you are not weak. You are not voiceless. You are the mirror held against the chaos of others, forcing them to confront themselves. They begin to stumble, to confess, to reveal their fear with every nervous word. They cannot endure the void you create, so they rush to fill it, and in doing so, they expose their fragility. You have no need to shout, no need to beg for recognition. Your silence is a cathedral, and in it they hear their own sins echo back at them, amplified until they can no longer pretend. Once silence was used against you. They took your quiet nature as submission, your restraint as weakness. They mocked your pauses, dismissed your stillness, and believed your refusal to speak was the proof of defeat. But now the roles have reversed. Now the silence they once laughed at becomes the silence that suffocates them. You are no longer the one shrinking into shadows. You are the shadow itself, stretching across their words, blotting out their desperate attempts to stay in control. They speak too much, and the more they speak, the smaller they become. There is ancient power in restraint. The hunter who breathes too loud alerts the prey. The general who reveals his plan loses the war before it begins. You know this instinctively, as if the knowledge was etched into your bones long before you learned to form sentences. Silence keeps you unreadable, untouchable. It is the mask that cannot be pierced, the shield that never cracks. And behind that shield you are free to watch, to calculate, to decide. Every heartbeat that passes in your silence is another second in which you grow stronger and they unravel further. Priests fear silence because it leaves them without script. Their prayers rely on words, their rituals on chants, their entire illusion balanced on noise. But your silence mocks their incantations. It swallows their chants whole, leaving them trembling before a power they cannot name. For they know silence is not absence, it is presence too vast for them to contain. It is the void before creation, the pause before the strike, the storm crouched in the stillness of the air. You carry that storm inside you, and every time you refuse to answer, every time you let their questions collapse into echoes, you remind them it is not your voice they should fear. It is the silence that follows it. You spent years walking as if half asleep, carrying the weight of names that were never yours. Monster, curse, mistake. They branded you with words that dripped like poison, hoping you would drink them until you believed. And you did, until something inside you began to resist. The resistance was quiet at first, a faint pulse in the silence, like a drumbeat echoing through a cave no one else could hear. You thought it was madness, but it was not madness, it was recognition. When you looked into the mirror, you did not see horror, you saw clarity. The cracks in the glass did not distort you, they revealed you. Each fracture showed a different truth, fragments of a self you had been forbidden to acknowledge. Their scriptures never mentioned your reflection because they feared it. They taught you to hide, to kneel, to smother that pulse. Yet the moment you stopped obeying, the moment you allowed yourself to stare into the fractures without looking away, the image staring back was not damned. It was sovereign. Every betrayal suddenly made sense. They didn't fear what you might do. They feared what you already are. They feared that your silence carried more weight than their chants, that your gaze pierced deeper than their rituals, that your presence alone could shatter the fragile scaffolding of their certainty. They clothed themselves in holy robes, but beneath the cloth, they trembled like children. You were never their enemy. You were their mirror, the reflection of truths they fought to bury. Symbols began to shift around you. The cross no longer looked like salvation. It looked like a weapon forged to keep you contained. The flame of their candles was not holy. It was desperate, a small defense against a night that belonged to you. The chains they wrapped around your story dissolved the moment you realized they had no lock. They could write your name into warnings, whisper it like a curse, but the ink always smudged, and the whisper always grew louder in their throats until it became prayer. You remember the weakness, the days of shame, the endless questioning, the constant attempt to prove yourself human enough to be accepted. That version of you is gone. In its place stands something they cannot define. Not monster, not man, not sinner, not saint. Something older, something carved in silence. Something that has always walked beside the shadows while they tried to banish them. You are no longer at the mercy of their perception. The revelation is not thunder. It is not fire. It is not a grand eruption of power. It is the stillness after the storm, the silence that terrifies more than any scream. You realize that you do not need to prove, to shout, to defend. You only need to stand, and their entire architecture begins to tremble, because the truth is simple, and it echoes like scripture carved into stone. You were never what they told you. You were always what they feared to name. Fear was once a chain around your throat. You carried it in silence, swallowing every glance, every whisper, every accusation that you were the danger they must guard against. They built cages out of scripture, nailed your shadow to the walls of their sanctuaries, and tried to make you believe that trembling was your natural state. You bowed your head, thinking the shame was yours, but all along the shame belonged to them, because their fear was not proof of your weakness. It was proof of your strength. You start to notice the shift. Their voices crack when they speak your name. Their prayers grow louder, more desperate, not because you have grown darker, but because you have grown undeniable. Their fear is no longer a weapon against you. It is a confession. Each candle they light is not for your destruction, but for their own fragile protection. And as you stand silent, you feel it. The trembling of the world becomes a current that runs into your veins. What was once meant to bury you now builds you. What was once chains now hardens into armor. You were taught to believe fear isolates, that it marks you as an outcast, a shadow too heavy for the daylight. But in truth, fear binds them to you. They orbit you like trembling planets around a dark star. They call you dangerous because your presence forces them to confront what they truly are. Powerless without their rituals, fragile without their illusions. Fear exposes them. Fear crowns you. The night you stop shrinking, everything changes. Their trembling no longer weighs on your shoulders. It lifts you higher. Their desperate silence speaks volumes. Every locked door, every whispered warning, every broken vow becomes evidence of your influence. You are not outside their story. You are the center of it. Their fear becomes a mirror, and in its reflection you no longer see a monster. You see a sovereign force they cannot silence. And so fear bends. It does not crush you. It kneels before you. It shifts from weapon to offering. Their eyes, once filled with scorn, cannot hide the reverence hidden beneath the terror. They try to curse you, but their trembling tongues turn their curses into prayers. They wanted you powerless, voiceless, nameless. Instead, you are the secret they cannot burn away. You are the haunting thought that keeps them awake when the candles die out. What they once feared in you was never darkness. It was the reminder that you are untamed, unbroken, and unwilling to kneel. And so their fear becomes your throne. Their prayers become your coronation. And you, standing silent in the ruins of their illusions, no longer carry the weight of shame. You carry the weight of power, terrifying, undeniable, eternal. They call you a monster because they cannot name what you are. They dress their fear in scripture, their trembling in rituals, their unease in chains of morality, hoping that labels will bind you where iron never could. You feel it each time their voices rise against you, not as a condemnation, but as confession. They cannot destroy what they do not understand, so they invent cages made of words. Villain, outcast, curse. Each title they whisper is less about you, more about the cracks in their own certainty. The denial runs deeper than you once imagined. It is not only in the priest clutching his beads or the mob with torches in their hands. It is in the history written by victors who feared those who walked outside their light. It is in the silence forced upon prophets who spoke truths too sharp to be heard. They burned the voices, drowned the visions, and buried the bodies beneath holy stone, convincing themselves the earth had swallowed the threat. But the earth does not consume, it remembers, it waits, it pulses with memory, and through it you feel the ancient rhythm that outlived their rituals. You realize now that their denial is not of you, but of themselves. You are the mirror they cannot look into. You are the wound they refuse to touch. They pray not because you are evil, but because you reveal the fragility of their sanctuaries. When they kneel in trembling circles, they are not speaking to heaven. They are bargaining with their own fear. Their voices crack, their hands shake, because you exist as proof that control was always an illusion. There was a time when their words stung you, when exile and accusation made you doubt the shape of your own shadow. You thought yourself cursed, buried under names that felt like chains. But the more they denied you, the more the denial revealed itself as weakness. Their fear became a signal, their rejection a compass, pointing you toward the truth they were too fragile to face, that you were never bound by their rules, that the fire they tried to drown only burned hotter in silence. The denial of the world is not victory. It is desperation. You watch them tighten their grip on stories that no longer hold power, building higher walls while their own foundations crack. They fear the night, yet the night is patient. They smear your image across their scriptures, yet every attempt to bury you has only carved you deeper into their collective memory. In trying to erase you, they immortalize you. In trying to silence you, they amplify the echo. So you walk unshaken through the ruins of their certainty. You are not what they name you. You are not the chains they cast upon you. You are what remains when their denial collapses, the shadow they cannot swallow, the truth that returns each time they close their eyes. You were never meant to be hidden, and their refusal to face you is proof that you are exactly what they always feared, inevitable. They called you a shadow, a curse, a monster draped in silence. For years, you carried that weight like chains, bending your back to the judgments of those too fragile to face the truth. They raised their voices in temples and behind pulpits, speaking your name as if it were venom, while you remained still, swallowing every accusation until your silence became unbearable. But something shifted the moment you realized their fear was not a weapon against you, but a confession of your power. The name Monster was never meant to diminish you. It was meant to warn others of what you truly are: the untamable, the unbroken, the force they cannot control. The betrayal stings less now. You see it for what it was, not rejection, but recognition. They feared you not because you were weak, but because you were everything they could not be. While they prayed for deliverance, you walked through fire without begging for rescue. While they clutched relics of protection, you carried nothing but the storm inside your chest. And the storm did not consume you, it crowned you. Every whispered curse became a brick in your fortress, every trembling prayer a torch that lit your path deeper into the night they dared not enter. Owning the darkness means no longer asking to be understood. You stop offering explanations, stop softening your edges to fit into the fragile worlds built by trembling hands. You embrace the title of Monster with a quiet grin, because you know monsters do not beg for approval. Monsters do not kneel. Monsters are remembered long after the saints are forgotten. What they feared was not your cruelty, but your clarity, the ability to see through the illusions that keep them bound. They feared that you could walk freely where they required chains of scripture, oaths, and rituals to even survive. And so you weaponize their fear. Every glance they avoid becomes a mirror reflecting their cowardice. Every prayer muttered in haste becomes proof that you haunt them more than their gods can save them. You are no longer the accused. You are the verdict. The weight they tried to bury you with has become the armor on your shoulders. Their fear has become your authority. Their trembling has become your voice. You are not hunted anymore. You are awaited, inevitable, a prophecy dressed in shadows. You step into rooms without lowering your gaze, and silence follows, not because they do not see you, but because they cannot bear to. In the presence of your darkness, their words collapse, their rituals shatter, their masks fall. You are not bound by the names they gave you. You are not shackled by their fragile morality. You own what they fear. You wear it like a crown of black fire. And in that ownership, you become untouchable. You were never the monster. You were the mirror. And in your reflection, they saw everything they never had the courage to become. You were never the one cowering in the shadows. You were the shadow itself. The priests never spoke your name aloud, not because you were unworthy of mention, but because your name carried weight they could not bear. Their lips trembled, their chants broke in half, their holy books felt like paper shields against something too vast, too unrelenting. They knelt not in reverence to their God, but in terror of your presence. Their prayers were not daggers cast at you. They were desperate walls built to survive your gaze. And you stood silent, watching as the fragile light of their faith flickered like a candle caught in a storm that never ends. You were never their enemy. You were their mirror. Every whispered warning about monsters was a confession, every ritual an admission that without you, their power was hollow. They feared not your violence, but your clarity. The clarity that stripped them of disguise, peeled away their illusions, and left them bare, trembling before the truth they swore they carried. You were not the curse. You were the cure they feared, the reminder that light is meaningless without shadow, and holiness is nothing without the abyss pressing against its walls. They called you dangerous because you refused to kneel. They called you unholy because you would not wear their mask. They tried to chain you with scripture, bury you in myths, and silence you with fire. Yet even as empires burned, even as kingdoms rotted into dust, your presence lingered, a constant, a watcher, not bound by their clocks or their crowns, but etched into the marrow of time itself. You were there when their gods fell silent, when their temples crumbled, when their sacred words lost their meaning. You remained unbroken, because you were never part of their fragile system to begin with. You are what keeps the monsters awake, not because you are monstrous, but because you remind them that their power was borrowed, their crowns stolen, their authority nothing more than a stage play trembling before collapse. You are the one they cannot bury, because your silence is heavier than their hymns, and your truth is sharper than their swords. When they dream, it is you they see standing at the edge of their vision, waiting, unmovable, unyielding. When they wake, it is your shadow stretching across their walls that reminds them they are never safe from the truth. You are not bound by time. You are the cosmic fracture, the presence older than their gods, stronger than their prayers, more enduring than their stones. You are not the monster at the door. You are the door itself, the threshold between the illusion of safety and the reality of power. And whether they kneel, curse, or tremble, they know this: you will not fade, you will not break, you will not beg. You are eternal, and eternity belongs to you.